the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Sorry? Oh, I didn't bang the gavel. There we go. I'll try again. Can I welcome everyone to the Police and Crime Committee meeting? This morning we will be holding a discussion on how the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime is overseeing culture change in the Metropolitan Police Service. Please make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Deputy Chairman. We've received apologies for absence today from the Chair, Assembly Member Ahmad, and the Deputy Chairman has assumed the chair for the meeting.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meetings held on the 3rd of December 2025 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Can we note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings of the committee and the additional correspondence sent and received? Thank you. Can we also note the response to the summons notice requiring the Mayor of London to provide the committee with the documents set out at paragraph 5.1 of the report? Thank you. Right, so we now move on to our main item of business, and I would like to welcome our first panel of guests, David Spencer, who is the Head of Crime and Justice for the Policy Exchange, and Diane Vincent, Chair, Metropolitan Black Police Associations. Good morning, both. And also joining us remotely, Chief Constable Gavin Stevens, QPM, who is the Chair of the National Police Chiefs Council. So welcome, all of you. Thank you. I'm going to start by asking the first question, and it's to all of you, and I'll start with David, if I may. In your opinion and experience, how effective is MOPAC at overseeing culture change in the Met, and what is working well, and where could improvements be made?
Good morning. I think if I start with probably the positive, the most positive piece here, which is actually both MOPAC and the Met, is the transparency of data. So across a wide range of areas, and particularly on crime, confidence, trust, public attitudes, and also specifically coming out of the Met, workforce data. When you compare MOPAC and the Met against other forces and other police and crime commissioners, the level of data that is available publicly is far, far superior. And that has been the case for a very long time. The Public Attitudes Survey, as an example, run by MOPAC, has been in existence for some 30 years or so. So actually, in terms of the transparency of data, that is light years ahead of other forces. So I think that's a real positive, because whether it's people like me or journalists or members of the public want to understand what is going on inside the Met, there is a ready data source available to understand that in actually some considerable detail. And if I look at other forces, not just some of the smaller forces, but actually big forces as well, that is simply not the case. So I think that's a real positive for the Met and MOPAC. I think the sort of negative side of transparency, which is, I would argue, at the root of accountability, is when we start thinking about how does the Met in particular work with and deal with different stakeholders. So one of the questions within the briefing for today is about how the force engages with stakeholders. And one of the challenges here is it's very difficult to understand which stakeholders are involved, how are they selected, what advice are they giving, how are they chosen, that sort of detail. And so while there is transparency on the data, in terms of the sort of the side closed door discussions, it's very, very difficult to get an accurate picture of that. So I think that's where I would start in terms of transparency and the link to accountability.
Okay, thank you. Dan, I'll come to you next, and thank you for coming at such short notice. We're really very grateful.
For me, measuring cultural change, data, transparency and indicators, cultural transformation is not being tracked through a clear, consistent, transparent process or set of performance indicators. Force-wide averages, mask disparities. We need a robust BCU-level data to essentially identify hotspots of harm and track progress over time. Our data, the Met routinely applies sophisticated victim offender location analysis data to external policing. The same approach should be applied internally when it comes to misconduct, when it comes to disproportionality, promotion, when it comes to vetting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gavin, can I have your view?
Yeah, probably the best I can help the panel with is to do so with reference to the national strategy. Sorry, I'm getting quite a lot of feedback. I don't know whether that can be resolved.
Okay, we'll ask our technical people to.
Okay, I'll keep going, Jen, and hopefully it's not causing you too much disruption there. It's just difficult at this end. With reference to the National Police Chiefs Council strategy on culture and inclusion, what that makes clear, and it has been adopted by all forces, including colleagues in the Metropolitan Police, is the need for a clear vision about what's been tried to be achieved, a mission to deliver that. And there's 4 fundamental building blocks of the national strategy, which I'd encourage the panel to take a look at and use as a quality assurance framework under 2 themes. One is how the organisation itself is evolving, and the second is how it works with communities and with the public. As David has already covered, the data and information that underpins that is absolutely essential to tracking progress. The pillars that then build up the national strategy are equally important. So at the national level, this is done firstly on protected, so a police service that protects people from crime and seeks justice for victims, and to be a bit more specific on that, by investigating the crime and not the victim, by seeking to reduce victimisation and taking clear action to tackle extremism, racism, sexist, misogynistic behaviour, so on and so forth. And of course, the intended outcome there is to both reduce crime and increase feelings of safety. The second sort of block of outcomes that are intended is respected, so a police service that is perceived by everyone to be fair and respectful, equitable in all that it does, by eliminating bias, stereotyping, profiling and discrimination, understanding what might underpin some of those stereotypes and myths, of course intended to increase confidence. Thirdly is around involvement, a police service where people from all backgrounds can and do input into the governance process, so improving community engagement and decision making, oversight, scrutiny, legitimacy. Sometimes the way I describe this in shorthand is that those that trust us the least should have the greatest opportunity to influence. So also included in that is responding to community trauma and reconciliation where needed, so that engagement improves. And then finally, a police service that's representative of the public that it serves, advances equality of opportunity, fosters good relationships, again, eliminating bias in policies and practices and procedures and so on. Of course, the intended outcome being that it improves the public's perception of the police service as an employer. My final point is that nationally there is a best practice document. It runs to some 99 pages of innovative practice in those 4 different areas. And the Metropolitan Police does have entries in that best practice document. So if the panel have not seen that, it would be worth looking at both the overarching national strategy and the best practice document.
Okay, thank you. I'm aware of a lot of that, but the real question is, how good is MOPAC at actually identifying whether you're actually doing what you say you're supposed to be doing?
I'm afraid, Chair, I can't help you on that because my role is not in any way involved in MOPAC. I've been invited as the Chair of the National Council.
Okay, all right then. I'll go.
I can't help on that.
Okay, fair enough. To David and Diane, the basic nub of this is, how good do you think that MOPAC, the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, how good are they at challenging some of the things that are put in place to give us the detail? And David, you were talking about the transparency and how good the documents are. If the dashboards aren't looking so good, how good do you think MOPAC are at saying, look, that's on red or that's on amber? How good are they at challenging what's being done?
Well, the biggest gap when it comes to accountability, and to an extent this is an issue with the Met and MOPAC, but actually it's a far broader issue nationally in police, or it is as broad an issue in policing nationally, is around accountability for performance and particularly on crime. Now, as I say, that's a consistent issue across forces, but it is undoubtedly the case here. And what I mean by that is, ultimately, is there a consequence, a real consequence, for failure in a particular area? And the reality is that is rarely the case, particularly when it comes to crime performance. And an example, we're talking about culture today. If we take as an example Chapter 3 of the Casey Review, which talked about how the Met essentially operates its resourcing and human resources and that sort of stuff, or we look at the recent review of vetting that's come out, given what we have seen over the last 10 years in those areas, it should be inconceivable that the senior leaders who are responsible for those areas are still in post. And yet, certainly when it was reported in The Guardian, I think last week when the vetting story broke, that report said those people are still in post. So the question I would ask of MOPAC, and actually the Commissioner, is if the Casey Review is accurate, if the vetting review is accurate, then how is it tenable that the most senior people who made those decisions over the last 10 years are still in post, as The Guardian reported? Now, The Guardian could be wrong, of course, but if I presume for a moment it isn't. So, therefore, my question would be of MOPAC is, are MOPAC asking those questions?
Well,
and my fear is they are not.
Yeah, but that is exactly what we're here to find out. So it is exactly how good is MOPAC. Diane, do you want to comment? Or if not, we'll move on because there's lots of other questions.
I'm going to take it from where I left off when I spoke about the same approach that could be applied to misconduct, that could have been applied to grievances, suspensions.
It's more, Diane, are they doing it? Not what they could do, are they doing it?
I think,
if not, there are other questions that might cover what you're going to say. It's more or less, the questions are, how well are MOPAC doing?
I think MOPAC should be a lot more robust in challenging the Met. Otherwise, some of the issues, like you recently just mentioned, vetting, would not be out there. And publishing data for misconduct and grievances, these are things that have been going on for quite some time. MOPAC should have been robust in their challenges in getting the Met to publish their accessible statistics in a timely manner and in a more subject to, obviously, safeguards.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll move on, but at the end, if there's anything else you want to say, obviously we'll be thrilled to hear it. Okay, thank you. I'll now move on to Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Morning to all our guests. I'll start with you, David. Is MOPAC the right body to provide this oversight for the Met, considering some of its responsibilities are national? That's one question. And a little addendum to that is that historically, if we're to take our other guests' opinions, they haven't been that good at it. So even you yourself asked the question, are they asking the correct questions? So I want to take it back a step. Are they even the body that should be asking these questions?
Well, of course, they didn't. That wasn't always the case. It's not a law of physics. It doesn't need to be the case, as you suggest in your question. And I'm very conscious there are Assembly members here who have been involved in police governance far longer than me, who will remember the pre-2000 arrangements where essentially the police authority was the Home Secretary. So I'm conscious not to sort of lecture to those who were here.
Oh, no, we're happy for you
times.
to lecture them. Don't worry about that.
I certainly think there is, I'm particularly looking at Lord Duval here, I think, in particular. I certainly think that there are questions to be asked over whether MOPAC and the Mayor of London have discharged their duties sufficiently to hold the Met to account when it comes to crime performance. When we look at, for example, and this is, as always, a complicated picture. So we've seen this week the confirmation of the homicide rate last year in the Met. That is clearly significant information. My hope is, as I think we all do, is that the homicide rate continues to fall and that we see less people being killed on the streets of London, of course. But we also know that when we've seen things like shoplifting, phone theft, those sorts of crime types, that we are not seeing those head in the right direction. In fact, they're very clearly heading in the wrong direction. So the question is, are MOPAC, is it just the current incarnation of MOPAC and the Mayor who are unable to hold the Met to account on some of these issues that really matter to Londoners? Or is it the fundamental system? Well, we've seen the system actually operate effectively in the past, where we have seen actually significant crime reductions in the past. So therefore, I am unsure whether it is the system that is at fault or whether those that is operating it at the moment based on some of the crime types that are heading in the right direction.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, if I take your logic, it would suggest it is a system because the previous system, and if I put words in your mouth, please correct me, was more effective than the current system.
Well, no, I think what I'm saying is that under the mayoral model and MOPAC, under that model, we have seen in the past that being effective.
Okay.
So if we go back to the sort of 2010 to sort of 2018 period, we did see some significant reductions in crime types like robbery, burglary, phone theft, those sorts of things. So I'm not necessarily saying it is the fundamental system that is at fault. I'm questioning whether the way that system is being operated currently is effective.
Thank you for that clarification.
But it's a complicated picture because, as we've seen, the reduction in homicides is unequivocally a positive story. So
yes, okay, I accept that. Just to come into you, Diane, particularly when we're talking about serving officers and how they feel about this change in or not in culture, do you feel that MOPAC are even the right people to ask the question? That's fundamental. Are they the right people to ask the questions?
For me, I'm not entirely sure because I think the proximity of the Met and MOPAC, it's too close for comfort. There is this blurred accountability where MOPAC and Met, they are too institutionally and personally close or aligned, and that could undermine effective independent oversight. There are times when MOPAC representatives, when they refer to the Met, when they're talking, they refer to, they say we and us, signaling that there is an alignment, they're close together rather than any differences for scrutiny. Personal challenges or the personal relationships would risk softening the challenge, particularly when it comes to culture and discrimination and misconduct-related issues.
Thank you. That's a very clear answer. Thank you very much. And I'd just quickly go on to our Chief Constable, particularly to focus on the fact that because the Met has many national functions, do you believe that MOPAC are the right people, the right setup to ask these questions?
Yeah, yes, I do. And I would, based on the fact that I've seen significant test and challenge, I mean, not least that we had a very high-profile change of a commissioner. The Metropolitan Police have been through the HMIC Engage process, on which I have a role. In that process, I've observed very significant test and challenge in order to support the Metropolitan Police in improving and moving out of Engage. Of course, that was a...
Sorry, Chief Constable, just to cut across you there. When you say significant test and challenge, do you mean by MOPAC? By
MOPAC, yeah. I've observed that. I've observed that personally. Yes, I mean, as we've said in evidence so far, key thing is the use of the data in doing so. And if I refer back to the national strategy, another key thing is making sure that the voice of the community through MOPAC is adequately challenged in the questions that are put and the improvements that are requested. So providing they're commissioning the right independent people to do reports on topics as they come along, listening carefully to the voice of communities, and as has just been said, also internally to staff. I see that being relayed through significant test and challenge, and I think we see improvements.
Thank you. And finally, just to come to you, David, you made comments about people still being in post after what looks like very serious transgressions or failures of delivery. What signal do you think that's sending to the public about MOPAC being the correct mechanism to fulfil this role?
Of course, ultimately, it is the Commissioner who is responsible for appointing his senior team, and where there are failings there, it is ultimately down to him to decide who remains in post. I haven't seen, and others may well have done, and I would imagine these conversations would take place in private. I haven't seen publicly MOPAC or the London Policing Board ask those questions as to whether the right people are still in post, given those. But that's perhaps not surprising. You would imagine perhaps those conversations would potentially take place in private. So I don't know is the honest answer whether they've taken place in private, but certainly based on the reporting last week, it is a question which certainly should be asked.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Thank you for joining us, panel. The Casey review stated that the Met made it very hard for MOPAC to scrutinise them. Do you think true scrutiny of the Met is possible under the current arrangements? Start with Diane.
Can you put your microphone on? Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Right.
It's extremely difficult to scrutinize the Met. It's extremely huge, which was pointed out by Casey in her report. And even when those points are highlighted, having scrutinized the systems in place, again, the Met should be able to respond adequately, which we haven't seen. And this dates back beyond Casey to prior reports that we have had, that the Met, it's extremely hard to be scrutinized entirely.
David, do you want to...
Certainly when I speak to senior officers in the Met, both current serving and previous, they insist that they are scrutinised to the nth degree on a very regular basis, and that they say that a very significant amount of their time is spent dealing with responses to that scrutiny. One of the questions I would ask is whether the introduction of the London Policing Board in particular has been a successful move or not. Now, the Policing Board is relatively early in its gestation. It's not been going for that long in reality, so it may be too early to judge. But certainly when we look at, the reality is senior officers need to have sufficient time to prepare for scrutiny. And given we would expect that London's elected representatives, i.e. all of you, that they would have to appear here. The fact that they then also have to go to the London Policing Board as well and have private conversations with Mopac, the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor, I wonder whether with the addition of the London Policing Board has added anything positive, whether it's just additional complexity which is taking away from senior officers being able to undertake their role effectively. So that would certainly be a question that I would ask about the current arrangements.
Thank you very much. I think one of my colleagues will have a question about the London Policing Board very soon. Gavin, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this question?
Well, only just to say that my observation is that the Metropolitan Police, through Mopac and other mechanisms, is probably one of the most scrutinised organisations in the world. We can probably read more about the performance of the Metropolitan Police through direct media scrutiny, through media reporting on reports that have been commissioned, through the work of Mopac and panels like this, than we can of many other public institutions. I think the question that we all wrestle with, because it is such an important institution for the safety of the country, is how well is it performing? We've all touched on that this morning. But I don't see any lack of scrutiny and oversight. I see more reporting on this organisation than I do on pretty much any other aspect of the public service.
Thank you very much. And for my next question, I'll come to David and then Diane. In your opinion, what changes would be necessary to improve that relationship between Mopac and the Met from a scrutiny standpoint? I'm not sure it is necessary for the relationship to improve necessarily. It is a naturally, to a degree, contested relationship. That is the nature of scrutiny, and that is the way it absolutely should be. In the same way, when senior officers come here and are questioned by all of you, there should be a degree of contestation, maybe the wrong word, but certainly a significant degree of challenge to that. So I'm not sure necessarily the relationship needs to improve. I do think the current commissioner and his leadership team, and perhaps on the flip side, Mopac as well, have clearly moved things forward to a more productive state of affairs than where we were a few years ago. I think there's no doubt that that is the case, and that is a positive thing. I would certainly agree with Gavin's point about that the Met is highly scrutinised. I think the change that is required when it comes to the scrutiny and accountability here is that what is the consequence when things go wrong? And that's the point I made earlier about the vetting and the HR and the recruitment stuff. But actually, we can see that in crime as well. Is Mopac actually able to reach into the Met and ensure there is consequence for failure? Now, this isn't just an issue in the Met. This is actually an issue across policing. But it is rare to almost impossible, for example, for a senior or middle leader in policing to lose their job just because they're rubbish at crime performance, just because they're rubbish crime fighters. It almost never happens. They might get shuffled off to some non-frontline sinecure, but they're not going to lose their job because they're rubbish at fighting crime, which ultimately is what the public wants. And so I think the fact that Mopac certainly struggles to do that, and you might say, well, actually, their job is to hold the Commissioner to account. It's the Commissioner's job to reach into the organisation. But the fact that it is almost unheard of for a senior or middle leader to lose their job over poor crime performance would suggest that actually the accountability isn't reaching in far enough to the system. And just on that, just to be clear, you think there should be that accountability of if you aren't performing in the role that you should be removed?
Well, I certainly think there should be more consequences for failure. I think that if you are, and I apologise for the sort of slightly flippant turn of phrase, but if you are a senior leader or a middle leader who is just not very good at crime performance, at fighting crime in the local area where you are responsible for, then over a period of time where that is proven, it would be my view that you should no longer be in post. And it is as simple as that. And I think that's what the public would expect as well. If you're a senior police officer who is just rubbish at leading crime fighters, you should not be in your job anymore. And the fact that that never happens, and it's not just the Met, is a system-wide problem nationally, but the fact that that almost never happens, in my view, is deeply problematic for the accountability system. And it basically means if the hardest edge, which I'm not saying should always be used, but if there is, ultimately, if you can't lose your job for being rubbish, then there is no real accountability system here.
Thank you. Diane?
Can you put your microphone on? Sorry, it's
I keep
difficult to
forgetting,
remember.
so
Don't
thank
worry,
you.
don't worry.
For me, I'm going to raise the relationship with the Met and the London Policing Board. Obviously, the purpose, the authority and the effectiveness of the London Policing Board. First of all, what is the current purpose?
Just on that, because one of my colleagues has a question directly on the London Policing Board, so I don't want to step on his toes.
Right.
So yeah, if maybe you could park the good answer you're about to give, maybe a couple of questions time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and we'll come back to that, Diane. Thank you. Assemblymember Wilson, did you still want to come in on this?
Yes, briefly, although I think David in particular, you've already kind of started to unravel what I was about to ask. So, I mean, looking from the outside, trying to sort of picture together the kind of structures of accountability and scrutiny, and again, I don't want to tread on my colleague's toes who's going to ask specifically about the policing board, but obviously that's part of the mix. So you have MOPAC, this committee of elected members elected across London to hopefully have some insight and oversight on these matters. It does sort of feel to me like there's an element. I'm sort of conscious that the main topic of this meeting is talking about cultural change, but I think it's a wider issue of oversight and scrutiny around the activities of the Met. And it's not always clear to see what's a policy decision, what's an operational decision, who has oversight and scrutiny of each of those elements. And certainly when we have the Mayor in front of us, there's often an element of passing the buck. And actually the question really is, with that confusion, with that lack of clarity, with that potential lack of accountability, how can we make it clear to the public that we represent where the buck actually should stop?
So the concept, I think what you're getting towards is the concept of operational independence, I think, or certainly partly. And this is again, the Met isn't unique in this regard. This is probably, and Gavin may have more insight on this particular point than I, looking at the national picture, but the discussion between police and crime commissioners or police authorities and their chief constables, or commissioner in this case, around what is an overarching policy decision, what is an operational decision, that line is perhaps never going to be sort of chiselled in stone. It is always going to have a degree of flexibility. That is probably just the nature of day-to-day operational policing. However, I think what we have seen over the last 10 to 20 years or so is an expansion of police chiefs' conception of operational independence, and therefore those that hold them to account, police authorities, police and crime commissioners, feeling less able to intervene in certain areas. So I certainly think there has been a shift in the conception of operational independence over the last 2 decades or so. And therefore that does make it very difficult to be clear on who is accountable for what as a result. But ultimately, the Mayor of London and you as elected representatives are accountable to the public. And therefore you need to be able to be satisfied, and the Mayor needs to be satisfied, that the Commissioner is exercising his duties effectively. And there therefore needs to be a consequence for those who work for the Commissioner when those failings become apparent. And I think my critical point is, what is not clear is that when failure occurs, there is a consequence for that failure.
Gavin, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
Well, only just to be said, we've got to be clear about what's within the different organisations' legal remits here. So I take entirely David's line of argument, but it is not within either the Metropolitan Police's nor MOPAC's gift to operate outside of police regulations. Now, we've been advocating for some time, we may come on to it at a later question, for significant reform in policing, but any organisation has got to work within the regulations it's currently got. If there's one organisation that I've observed that has tried to stretch those in order to improve performance, I've certainly seen that in the Metropolitan Police. They're often the organisation actually that end up getting stated cases through the court, advocating for regulatory change that the Home Office then supports, that enables them to make progress. They're a quarter of UK policing, so they're often at the forefront of these things. But we ought not to assume that the Commissioner or indeed the Mayor has got all of the levers that they would like to have in order to change things in the way that David's described. And I would just give one other point of balance about the sort of crime-fighting argument, which I don't differ from. It is often what the public call for, but it's not always what the public call us about for help. That is a much broader mission, and a much more community need comes the way of the Metropolitan Police than fighting crime.
Thank you. Diana, do you have any comments on that?
No, nothing.
Okay. In which case, just briefly then, coming back, David, thank you for your answer and kind of acknowledging that there is a bit of a blurring on this question of operational independence. I mean, you suggested that the police and crime commissioners, or in our case, the Mayor, might find it difficult to intervene sometimes. I wonder whether he is actually quite happy using that as an excuse. We've had so many issues where we've been challenging him on things like the closure of front desks, or we had a bit of a ding-dong before Christmas over the publication of the estate strategy and how that process was overseen, and whether it was going through the policing board or should have come to us first. I get a feeling, and I'm sure some colleagues will agree, some colleagues might disagree, he sometimes finds it quite very convenient to hide behind that as an excuse. Is that something that you recognise, and if so, is that something that shouldn't be the case?
I'm probably not going to comment specifically on the Mayor, if that's okay. But what I will say is that within the sort of structure nationally of policing, where we have which is essentially a tripartite structure with the Home Secretary, the Chief Constable and the Police Authority, Police Crime Commissioner or the Mayor. It is not unusual for us to see the sort of buck passing that you describe happening. There are some stories in the newspapers this morning where certainly it sounds to me like there's some of that going on in a different force. So it is not unusual, and therefore, if what you're describing is the case, I would not be at all surprised that that's the case. Neither is it only the case in policing, I have to say. There is nothing that, for example, ministers like is probably too strong a word. There is nothing that something that we frequently see is ministers announcing the independent review, which is nothing more than an exercise in buck passing to someone else, and that's not. We see that all the time. So this is a feature, I'm afraid, of the British state in action. So it does not surprise me what you're describing here.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Dan, I'm nagging. I'm really sorry. Can you turn the microphone off when you're not using it? Only because Gavin's having echoing problems, so that might help. Thank you so much. Now we're going over to Assemblymember Garbett.
Morning, thank you both. So I want to talk about the BBC Panorama documentary on Charing Cross Police Station, and specifically ask what you think it shows about the oversight and accountability lines within the Met. And Diane, I'm going to come to you first, because I know at the time you said that you weren't at all surprised by what was uncovered in the documentary. So I just wondered if you could comment on that and what you think this shows for oversight and accountability, that some people were surprised. Diane, yeah, I'm going to come to you.
Based on the documentary, a lot of people, it wasn't just myself and comments made by myself, but a lot of our members from both the Met, Black Police Association, the National Black Police Association, and serving officers weren't surprised, because this is something they have experienced at some point in their career. Comments being made or behaviors, attitudes not being challenged, people being concerned about challenging attitudes, whistleblowers and things like that. And as such, this has gone on unchecked, and people feel emboldened and empowered to use those languages and behavior, even where there is CCTV, because we all know custody is covered throughout with CCTV. So no, not because some of these behaviors that should have gone to misconduct, people have been let off with a slap on the wrist. They haven't been dealt with the way or used as an example for others to see that the Met is actually tackling bad behavior within its ranks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that's really clear. So in terms of kind of oversight and accountability, the bits where you see the failings are the bits around the misconduct process. And I've asked before around the Commissioner around kind of dip sampling of CCTV in, so people know that that's being looked at. And I think that is being looked at, but wasn't happening already. And one of the questions that I also asked the Commissioner recently was whether anyone had complained, anyone who'd been treated poorly by the police and experienced that use of force. And he said that he wasn't sure that anyone did. So I just wondered if there was any comments that you wanted to make around the fact that no one had complained either. The people who were coming into Charing Cross, not the police officers.
I am sure that there were people who've had experiences who were just scared of the consequences about whistleblowing, even amongst, forget about the outsiders, even amongst colleagues working in custodies who were very concerned with the backlash from those they're working with, their team mates they're working with, as well as when that complaint gets out there to the authorities, what would have happened. So, yes.
And do you think enough's being done to address those concerns within the misconduct process to protect whistleblowers and the accountability? Do you think enough has been done in the wake of Charing Cross to look at those things?
It's really, really early days yet, but I haven't seen enough at the moment. I know there has been a lot of talk around culture change and reform, but with culture change, we also need policy changes because a lot of those policies does not benefit ethnic minorities, officers and staff, so black and brown colleagues. So, no.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really clear. David, just the same questions, I guess, within the context of the things you've been saying around consequence as well. I think that probably kind of rings true here as well.
Sure. Well, first of all, I would join in Diane's comment. Some of the things we saw in that documentary were disgusting, undoubtedly. The reality is Charing Cross, this is not the first time this committee or the public of London or more broadly have seen the problems at Charing Cross. And so, several years have gone by since the last major Charing Cross issue. So the question would have to be, what happened in the interim? And when you're talking about oversight, how was MOPAC able to get the reassurance? Because I would imagine they must have been reassured that Charing Cross had been resolved. So therefore, how was that reassurance provided, and particularly how were they? It would appear that they were unable or failed to reach sufficiently into the organisation to understand whether the issues at Charing Cross had been resolved, which they clearly hadn't been. And again, my understanding is that actually the Commissioner and his senior leadership team did have taken fairly swift action in terms of changing leadership teams and those sorts of things at Charing Cross. So, that is undoubtedly welcome. But, I guess my question for MOPAC is, how can MOPAC be sure that in 3 years' time we won't be here again? I do wonder if it might be helpful, because I've talked a few times about the sort of lack of consequences for failure, for me just to touch on something about the police leadership and promotion system, which causes a significant part of the problem. Police promotion systems operate as a vacuum. So they are imporous, and basically you go in at the bottom and it operates as a vacuum, almost like a bell jar, and it just sucks people up. So 50 chief officers, thereabouts, retire or leave every year nationally, and therefore, as a vacuum, you take those 50 off the top, another 50 need to be found, and the vacuum just sucks up the next 50. Now, whether there are 50 good enough people in the system for those jobs or not, 50 people are getting the lucky ticket, whether they're good enough or not. And that system is replicated all the way down the system. Every rank operates in essentially the same way. The vacuum nature of the promotion system will just keep sucking people up, whether they are good enough or not. And the reality is, because the system is not in any way porous, so you can't have outsiders essentially coming into the system, it means that if you want to take someone out of the system, you can't integrate new thinking outsiders into the system in any way effectively. So because it's totally porous, that's one of the reasons why there is almost no consequence for failure, because the system just replicates itself over and over and over and over again. Now, in the past, different ways have been tried on this sort of stuff. But even as an example, if there are high-quality people who are in policing as police officers, and I'm talking about police officers rather than staff here, if there are good police officers, they go out and do something else and want to come back at a higher rank, the regulations exist to enable that, but it almost never happens. It is vastly unlikely for it to happen. And that is not a regulatory problem. That is a choice by forces and chief constables not to do that. I would suggest part of the reason for that is because it's just too difficult to do. So they continue to replicate the system which exists. And that's one of the key reasons why there is no consequence for, or inadequate consequence for failure.
Yes, and you can understand how that leads to the difficulties with the culture change work as well. And I'm sure Chief Constable Stevens would want to come in. Obviously, the original question was around the oversight and accountability and what that showed from Charing Cross, but I'm sure you'd like to comment on some of what David has been saying as well.
I agree with David on bringing in difference, and I know we're going to come on to reform, but one of the things that we do need to see is much more ease of movement, less friction moving between organisations, in and out of organisations, going to get experience elsewhere, bringing fresh perspectives. We definitely need that. I think Charing Cross is a demonstration of, if you go all the way back to Macpherson, what was meant by you can change the people in the system, but the system remains. David described that really well. I guess on the positive, the one thing I would say is that the response to it this time round has been very robust, very swift in terms of whole-scale changes of people, rapid progress of misconduct proceedings, and so on. But I don't think there ought to be any complacency. So coming to the point of, so how do you prevent that happening again? External views I think is key. I mean, in this particular case, it was an external view of an undercover journalist, but there are custody visitor schemes. How robust are those? How well are their records being monitored? How often are the community invited in to see these police stations and meet the teams? The transparency that we spoke about earlier in terms of data, where that extends to transparency of community involvement, whether that's in police training or police practice, that always helps. So, really.
Thank you. And just briefly, have you got any comments on the complaints part of this and the fact that there's obviously that power imbalance and people's kind of fear of making a complaint to what they see as a part of the police? Have you got any comments on the complaints process?
Yeah, I mean, colleagues at IOPC have been doing really good work at extending them as a route of alternative approach, particularly the work that they've been supporting us on the Police Race Action Plan, encouraging black people to have an alternative route into IOPC. So maybe more could be done on the promotion of that route if there isn't confidence in going into the force systems. The other thing I ought to say is that the Metropolitan Police led the way on a system which is now national, on an anti-corruption hotline, and that's still a national service, it's still well used, but no harm in keeping the promotion of that going.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. David's lightly touched, I say lightly, on the question which I was going to ask, which is what are your reflections on the role of the London Policing Board and its impact as an additional scrutiny mechanism for the Met? David, we've heard your views. I wonder whether Diane or the Chief Constable has got any further thoughts that they wish to add.
Microphone.
I'll get used to it by the end. Well, with the London Policing Board, the purpose, the authority and effectiveness, obviously, it's the current purpose of the London Policing Board and how it differs from its original intent following the Casey review. I'm not so sure. While some board members unaware that the board was being created following the recommendations from Baroness Casey. Again, it did take a while for that board to be put together. Why do we have board meetings which continue to be dominated by the Met and the Met's presentations and everything, rather than more or less scrutiny and challenge from the board? It's like the Met takes over when there is some, where there's a committee meeting. What constraints are placed on the board members who actually try or attempt to be intrusive and asking the Met questions? Again, not sure about that. And again, we also know that some of these board members, I think there were a couple who've resigned from the board. because they are basically frustrated with what was going on, the lack of influence and why it wasn't publicly acknowledged. On what basis should the public have confidence that the board actually provides meaningful contribution, oversight, and rather than a performative reassurance?
Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you. Chief Constable?
I probably can't assist the panel on this one too much, just to say that I know of a number of particularly expert colleagues that have been invited from outside in to help the board. I can't comment beyond that.
Thank you very much. David, just with your insight into these matters, do you recognise the current London Policing Board as what was envisaged by Dame Louise Casey in her review? When her review came out, there was just a broad suggestion. Do you think that what she has now is what she had in mind?
It would be unwise for me to try and imagine what was in Baroness Casey's mind at any point. But I think one of my questions on the London Policing Board is around the sort of representation on it. It would appear to me that it is not intended in any way to be politically representative, and maybe that is what this committee is for, and that there was never an intention for it to be politically representative. But I don't think anyone would suggest that it is, and I don't just mean party politically. In my guess, and it would be a guess from having watched some of the proceedings that that most, if not all, of the members would ascribe to a sort of progressivist approach to how policing should operate and that sort of stuff, and maybe that aligns with the mayor's view as well. But that is certainly one of my questions about the board: is whether, just how representative really is it, and was it ever intended to be? Because I'm certainly not convinced that it is, but maybe it was never intended to be, and that's the purpose of this committee.
Yeah,
but that would be one of my queries on the board.
Yeah, one of our concerns which we raise quite regularly at this committee is the fact that what we have is a board which is entirely appointed by the mayor. There is no external mechanism, no checks, no balances to make sure that we're getting the correct, the plurality of views.
You articulate exactly the point I think I'm trying to make, actually, and maybe that was just never the intention of it. That it's just an extension of the mayor, and the mayor's views. And if that's the case, that may well be that may well be what it's doing. But I think you're right in terms of the observation you're making.
Thank you, Dr. Gillian Fairfield has been appointed to carry out an independent assessment of the Met's progress since the Casey reviews. Do you think that part of her remit should be to look at the London Policing Board and find out whether it's fit for purpose in its current form, given that it was created as a direct result of the Casey report? Well,
I would imagine that it would be a sensible course of action that nothing is off the table for Dr. Fairfield. Anything that was within the Casey review or touched upon it should be within her purview, I would think. And I don't think anyone, I rephrase, I would suggest that if we want a genuine review to take place, then she needs to have access to everything that came out of Casey or touched anywhere near Casey, and that would include the London Policing Board.
Thank you. Dan, any thoughts on that?
I think it would be great if she, first of all, I must say, before I answer the question, my concern again was why was Baroness Casey not brought back in to continue with the review, but then given something else, given another job to continue with. So, and moving on from there to answer your question, I think she needs to look into everything that governs the Met, including the most recent, some of the points raised within the 30 patterns of harm. Again, there's a lot of information in there that could help with her reviews. And I hope, honestly hope as well, that in addition to that review, the Met will take on the offer to work with Dr. Sherin Daniels. I'm yet still waiting for any updates on that, whether there will be continuing the work that she's already started in that light.
Thank you. And just one final question, if I may, Chair. We've heard a lot from David today about the lack of consequences for failure, which I think is a very good point, which you raise. One person that hasn't received any, and I don't wish to make this about a person, but an office that hasn't received any attention this morning is the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime, which we've only had 4 since 2008, and each one of them has sailed through without consequence through a series of scandals, which they're supposed to be the public face of scrutiny of the Metropolitan Police, and of course well, not the head of MOPAC, that's the mayor themselves, but they're the public face of MOPAC. Do you think it's right that such a position should be entirely within the gift of the mayor, with no external oversight into whether they're fit for the role? And would you have expected, perhaps, given that you have a deputy mayor in order to take the fall, that's their role, that over the last 20 years, at least one of them should have fallen on their sword for there's been some significant failures within the Metropolitan Police over the last 20 years with the oversight of MOPAC and the deputy mayor?
I'm not sure, is the honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's certainly a question that's worth considering. But I'm not sure this morning, instinctively, I know exactly what the answer is. Yeah.
Do you think the office lacks teeth?
I think it depends on who's in it. I think you're right. We've only had 4 over time. I think certainly if you ask the Met Commissioner, I suggest if you ask the Met Commissioners, some of them would feel that they really did have teeth.
We would be delighted.
But no, I'm not convinced that it lacks teeth. I think it entirely depends on who is in that post, as is the case with almost every public office. There are some over that time who I think we have seen be more effective than others. I will leave it to others to judge who they feel are more effective than not. I'm not sure. I think that that some have been more effective than others would be my my reflection.
Thank you, Dan.
I'll say from experience, obviously our engagement with the Deputy Mayor has been slightly reduced from an association point of view, so from the National Black Police Association and the BPA point of view, and some of the youth forums have been significantly reduced compared to previous years. We used to have regular meetings and messaging, but then now it's very difficult to distinguish between some of the consultation and the co-production and the communication that we have with the office, which, again, why a so-called consultation event often structured around predetermined messaging with limited scope for challenge or influence.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for overrunning.
Okay, a very, very short intervention from Lord Duval, please.
Very quickly, just following on from that and the earlier questions raised by Assembly Member Garbett, and just thinking forward, look, there are flaws in all organisations that oversee other organisations, policing board versus police authority. But one of the aspects of a police authority was oversight of senior ACPO appointments, which was lost in the trade-off of moving from police authority to police and crime commissioners. Do you think that has a role in terms of oversight and accountability and holding people to account along the lines that you said? And I'm glad that you did clarify that it wasn't just the Metropolitan Police that you felt was just guilty of not holding senior officers to account for performance, but there's a problem about policing as a whole, if I'm correct. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, and I have to say that the Met and this Commissioner actually is probably somewhat more robust than most other forces, I have to say. I'm not saying that I think it's sufficient, but certainly, I think the Commissioner can and should have gone further, but nonetheless, the problem is unfortunately far worse in many forces. I think it's an interesting observation about the role of oversight bodies and police authorities in terms of appointing senior officers. My only concern with it would be, and we talked earlier about the potential for buck passing, is if it is the police authority or the deputy mayor or whoever has a more formal role in appointing, say, deputy chiefs or assistant chiefs, that chief, should that go awry, then the chief constable may well turn around and say some more buck passing. Well, actually, it was because you appointed this clown. It wasn't me. So my concern would be, although I think it's certainly an important question to raise in terms of enabling oversight bodies to have greater reach in, my concern with it would be that it would further enable the buck passing that we spoke about earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, we're really running late now, so if we could keep answers shorter and to the point. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you, Chair. We've spoken a little bit about data throughout, but just to focus more specifically, Gavin, I'll come to you first and just ask that, in your opinion, do you think the right data is being collected to oversee cultural change in the Met?
Thank you. I mean, the reason I spent a few minutes on the structure at the start is that any good governance and scrutiny needs a structure. I know we've had a free-ranging discussion this morning, but I would really encourage the panel to look at what we've advocated as a strong national structure and look at that, how that has been applied across the totality of UK policing to give real clarity as to what outcomes you're seeking. If you've got structure, if you've got data against those outcomes, then you'll make progress. So I can't comment on the specific arrangements. I'm not close enough to MOPAC, but that would be my advice.
Okay. It's both MOPAC and the Met's data we're interested in, just to be clear. But I guess coming to yourself, Diane, as well, did you have any thoughts on whether it's the right set of data that's being collected both by the Met and MOPAC to measure success of cultural change?
Okay, can you microphone?
It's extremely hard to say what data is being collected at the moment. I don't know. I can't answer that, unfortunately. Sorry.
David, do you have any thoughts?
The Met is drowning in data. The Met and MOPAC. There is so much data they don't know what to do with it. Almost. That's probably a bit harsh, but I am absolutely sure that whatever the question is that is being asked, the data is in the system somewhere. The question is whether it's possible to dig it out and properly analyse it. Some of the briefings and the meetings and sessions I've been to, I'm amazed at the amount of data that exists within the Met, certainly compared to other forces or other public bodies, frankly. So I can't definitively say yes, but I suggest it's not about the collection. It's about, it's about knowing what's there in the assessment and analysis of it.
Yes, I guess the better question then is the right data being used to measure cultural change and performance against cultural change?
I suspect there are probably others better qualified than I to answer that question.
Okay. I think that the thing that we can see from the data is that only 10% of officers understand the new Met for London plan. Diane, from your understanding within the Federation, do you think that's something that tallies with what you see, that only 10% of officers understand the new Met for London?
Unfortunately, I don't know how many percentage of officers understand that. I don't have any data to hand.
Not in terms of that, just anecdotally, do you think that officers understand the new Met for London plan?
They do, yes. Okay. They do.
Then, just to query, why do you think it would be that in the survey only 10%? And I'm not saying that that's a wrong understanding. It's anecdotal, it's experience. But to hear from yourself that you think officers do understand it, then to see a survey where only 10% say they do, I wonder where's that disconnect? Why do you think that's different? Is there something people are saying in public that aren't saying in public that they would say in private, or what's that?
It might be that it's been described. Obviously, the Met are good at putting out messaging to do with certain of their operational roles out there. It could be well described at leadership level, but whether it's been experienced consistently across the organization, obviously that remains a bit fragile, a bit, maybe that's where that data came from. That's the only way I can see that.
Okay, and finally, to both of you and Gavin as well, if you did want to add, appreciating, I think that you've all said you're not too sure on what's being used, but what do you think would be the best way to measure that there has been cultural change? What would, to you, would show there has been a cultural change within the Met if you were looking at a data set?
Happy to lead off on that, to look back at that range of metrics that we advocate at the national level. So look at it under those 4 pillars, because the 4 pillars taken together will give you a demonstration of progress, both on engagement with the community and what is happening internally with the workforce.
Sorry, but how would you, what data set would you want to see that shows that those 4 pillars have been reached?
In the national plan, it describes the data sets against the individual components of the components of the plan. I'm just conscious of time, and I'm very happy to supply follow-up documentation.
Yeah, that'd be good, because obviously you can see in my briefing pack, for example, it says where it's being measured, but I'm not sure the actual data set that's being used to show. So if you did want to send that on, that would be helpful.
No problem.
Diane or David, any thoughts on what should be measured specifically that would show to you that cultural change is successful, or no?
I mean, the cultural change that I think important is the Met an effective crime-fighting force for Londoners. So, to be honest, the two measures that I think are most important, and you are the elected members, so you will know better than me, but the two measures that that I would think matter most to Londoners is crime going down and is public confidence in the police as a crime-fighting force going up. So I think everything else is subservient to those two things.
Thanks. I would agree.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you. I'm going to come to you again, David. The Commissioner has said that he will bring more external scrutiny and community involvement so that Londoners can hold the Met to account to a greater extent than ever before. What should this look like? Because there is an argument that the Met has enough scrutiny as it is, but is it the correct scrutiny? So does he need to bring more, or does he need to adjust some of the scrutiny that's happening now?
Well, I think my main concern here would be when we talk about external community, what are we actually talking about? Because, this is a point that I started with, is that when we talk about community groups, community leaders, stakeholder engagement, who are we talking about? Which groups are we talking about? How are those individuals selected? What is the advice that they give? If we're talking about elected members, it is very clear where that mandate comes from. It comes from the ballot box. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about stakeholder groups or community leaders and these sorts of things, it all starts to become much, much less clear, less transparent. And so my main point on this is if there is to be external stakeholder engagement, it must be transparent. So the broader public need to know who senior officers are meeting, where those people are, what groups they're from, how were they selected, what is the advice they were giving. It cannot be done behind closed doors, because that is when, and we've seen this, for example, with high-profile protests, that is when these sorts of things start to go awry.
I think you're correct, because then certain smaller groups who say they're community representatives then get to capture the conversation, etc. I would argue that the police board, which I refer to the mayor as the mayor and his mates, they have questions to answer about where did everybody come from and why they're there, the same sort of thing. I come to you now, Dan. You represent a community, arguably an internal community to the Met. But if you had the Commissioner here, what would you be asking for so that your community could have more purchase in the scrutiny of the Met, particularly around your issues?
First of all, we need a better working relationship with the Commissioner, because up till this point, again, my role is a full-time role, and we're still here, not having fully taken on the role. I'm currently based at Charing Cross, where on a safe and neighbourhoods team, dealing with my day-to-day job as well as the Met BPA organizational or association and roles. Better working relationship, we will be able to talk on a personal basis, raise concerns of our members directly, as opposed to hearing things from members of the community. That because we're talking about building trust and confidence with the community, we don't want to be finding out stuff that is going on out there. We want that relationship with the commissioner. Accountability, local leadership level, BCU should take accountability for their actions. We should be able to scrutinize those individual BOCU commanders, what they're doing, how regarding local cultural harms, how it's been identified, address how they're dealing with the issues in within their BCU.
Okay, thank you. And to come back to you, David, how do you think communities could be more effectively consulted and involved in oversight? Because there's mechanisms for communities to get involved, but do you think they're effective mechanisms? Are they fine? Do they need changing? What do you think could help that process?
I think, again, the Met and the Met Commissioner deserve some credit here, actually. So there's probably two things I would say. In the few years that this Commissioner has been in post, him and his senior team have been around every borough in London, actually now multiple times, inviting the public in to discuss what they've done, what they're doing, to hear what members of the public think should happen. I'm not sure that I remember any commissioner in the last 20 years doing as much as this one has tried to do in that regard. So I think, in fairness to this commissioner, he deserves a degree of credit for that. The other place where he deserves credit as well is the shift on neighbourhood policing from, and again, I'm going to be slightly flippant here, sort of a doctrine of sort of kissing babies and going to fates and that sort of stuff, through to actually turning it into a crime-fighting force. And what we have seen over the last 3 years is a shift in terms of local neighbourhood policing teams trying to focus on fighting crime and fighting the crime that matters to local people where they live. And I think that shift, that is the crux of what we need to see when we talk about community consultation or community engagement. That has to be the crux of it. Neighbourhood policing teams saying to local people, what are the issues that matter in terms of crime in this local area, because we're going to go away and do something about it. And I think over time the Met had lost that, and this Commissioner has tried to shift that dial. Now, I think they've been too slow at it, but nonetheless there is no doubt that that shift is happening, and for that he deserves some credit.
Thank you. And finally, to our Chief Constable, I nearly called you my Chief Constable there, excuse me, to our Chief Constable, and what do you think could be done to make community representation and scrutiny more effective, less egregious, a bit more of a helpful situation?
Yeah, David has summed it up there. The evidence-based practice shows that if communities are involved in identifying the issues that matter most to those, that if their local police understand it and then they're tackling those crime issues, that leads to confidence, and it is direct scrutiny because they can see straight away whether it's having an effect or not. So more of that, please, I think, as David has described.
Thank you. Chair?
Thank you very much. I'm coming to Assembly Member Wilson next. There's 3 more of you to ask questions, and Assembly Member Cooper hasn't asked anything yet, so can you keep yours as quick as you can?
I will certainly aim to do that, Chair. So we've talked a lot about London, obviously, and that's our role as in overseeing what goes on within the boundaries of our great capital city. But it's always useful to try and understand what's happening elsewhere in the country, and I think perhaps, Chief Constable, you might be best placed to kick off on this. Are there examples from outside of London of sort of positive oversight of police services that have helped lead to this culture change? And if so, what can we in London and MOPAC in particular learn from those experiences? Thank you.
Yes, and in the interest of time, I'm happy to provide follow-up written evidence. So we have a national chair that can assist with the further questions, and we have a national lead for improvement on culture, the Deputy Chief Constable in Lancashire. And as on the production of the national strategy, as I mentioned, there is an innovative practice document, so happy to share that. It extends to some 99 pages with examples from police forces all around the country. So rather than dive into the detail of that, happy to provide that in written follow-up.
That's great. Thank you very much.
That's very helpful. Thank you. We will be closing this meeting at 11:25, so we'll go over to Assemblymember Cooper now.
Thank you, Chair. Coming at this from a slightly different angle, some very interesting answers this morning, but going back to some of the things that Baroness Louise Casey said in her report, and she said that if sufficient progress, undefined what sufficient is, you may want to comment on that, is not being made by the Met, at the points of further review, more radical structural options, such as dividing up the Met into national, specialist and London responsibilities, should be considered to ensure the service to Londoners is prioritised. Now, David, I heard you just talking about, it should be a crime-fighting force that's delivering for Londoners. So perhaps your thoughts on that. I mean, people have talked about taking the diplomatic responsibilities or counter-terrorism off the Met, and do you think that's a good idea, or other changes that might spring to your mind?
Well, of course, the government has a policing reform white paper coming out. Well, we're told imminently. We shall see when when it means. But so that this question may well be addressed by government in the next couple of weeks. Certainly, Policy Exchange said relatively recently that we had concluded that the Met's national responsibilities, particularly around counter-terrorism, should probably be split off from the force. Now, there are many reasons why not to do that, and those reasons have been debated ad infinitum. The reason we concluded that it probably was the right step forward was because the national responsibilities, to some degree, are somewhat of a distraction from enabling senior officers to focus on fighting crime in London. Now, there are many arguments, as I say, why not to do it, but on balance, we think that now is probably the time to do it, but it doesn't come without risks, and it would be foolish to go into it without being conscious of those. But our conclusion is that it is probably the right time to do that.
Thank you for that. Sorry for suddenly my body deciding that it had to sneeze at that point. And it's very much the point that Louise Casey was making should be considered to ensure the service to Londoners is prioritised. So that was the context of what she was saying. I'm going to bring in Gavin at this point, who may have views about where counter-terror or other specialist services responsibilities should sit. What do you think about this? And do you think sufficient, I mean, it's probably not for you to say, but do you think sufficient progress has been made when we come to a review? Should some changes be made to the Met's responsibilities? What do you think?
For some time, National Police Chiefs Council has been advocating for significant police reform. The last time fundamental sort of ground-up design of policing was done was in the early 1960s, really addressing the issues of the post-Second World War. So we would advocate significant change in the system. That is going to come in a white paper in the next few weeks. I would put emphasis on what David was saying, is that change of this nature comes with significant risk. And let's not forget, whether we're talking about serious and organised crime in the partnership with the National Crime Agency or the National Counter-Terror Network, that Londoners are often at the forefront of some of those most acute threats, and we shouldn't reduce their safety by anything that we do. So any changes need to be very carefully thought through and implemented. Having said all of that, one of the components that we're advocating for is a stronger national centre to policing. In its fullest form, that national centre could take on counter-terror and serious organised crime responsibilities, but it should only do so when it is well established and has been well thought through. And at the moment, more broadly than that, the Metropolitan Police do carry a significant range of national responsibilities on behalf of UK policing, not just in counter-terrorism. So, for example, the body I represent is a non-statutory body, and it's hosted by MOPAC because there's nowhere else for it to live. And that's quite a common practice.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, no, conscious, I was just using that as an example. And finally, Diane, does your association have any thoughts about whether changing the responsibilities held by the Met would enable it to focus in on fighting crime and delivering for Londoners, or do you think things should stay as they are? And this, as everyone is pointing out, is in the context of, you know, potential changes being proposed in white papers next week or whenever.
As an association, we think the Met is too big to manage at the moment. It should be broken up into smaller pieces, manageable pieces. We know that for that change to take place, it might involve a few teething problems. We might have a few issues, but it is worth trying and having leaders for each sector once it's broken up to make for easier and better scrutiny.
I think there's a degree of consensus between the three speakers, but definitely the point about significant risk made quite strongly by two of you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Garbutt, very, very quickly, please.
I mean, Diane did articulate really beautifully what I know that the association holds around the Met being too big. But whilst, just to add a quick question here, at the beginning, David, you were talking about you think that the Met is transparent about the data that it holds, and that's not my reading of the new Met for London 2. I feel like they didn't talk to some of the things that they'd changed, and the graphs at the beginning were really misleading, like some of them showing, oh, we've made a huge increase, but when you actually look at the data, it's like 3%. So I just wondered if you thought the Met tells the truth, and linking to that, I know that the committee knows this, but I do a lot of work on drug reform, and I don't think the police are open about drug reform. For example, a government report in January 25 showed that Border Force seized 119 tonnes of drugs, which is a 52% increase from the year before. So I don't feel like there's that articulation of how some forms of enforcement and policing don't result in the action that people, are claiming that it does. But yeah, so does the Met tell the truth is the question.
Well, just to clarify, when I talk about the transparency of data, and this is the Met and MOPAC actually, what I'm talking about is the crime dashboards, the stop and search use of force dashboards. That there is a huge amount of data, and the Met and MOPAC provide unequivocally more data in a more usable fashion to the public than in that format than any other police force. And I would go so far as to say, like most of the other forces I've looked at internationally as well. So the Met, in terms of the raw data they provide, is transparent in that way. I completely take your point about then how that data is used by the Met. The Met would not be alone in being a public body trying to put forward a positive view, some might say spin, on the work it's done. I'm not sure that's exceptional or unusual even. I think one of the things with the new Met for London plan, both version 2 and version 1 is, and one of your earlier questions, or one of your colleagues' earlier questions was, do officers understand it? You could say, do the public understand? I mean, the documents themselves are just so long. They're like 70 pages long. It would be no surprise to me, it would be almost a surprise to me if anyone understood it and digested it all. It's fairly impenetrable for the ordinary member of the public, I would suggest. And that comes down to the data as well. I've not answered your question on do the Met tell the truth, intentionally so.
Okay. I don't think they do, especially on drug reform.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll all look forward to the white paper. And very, very briefly, the reason we are all upset with the London board is that it has stopped our senior police officers coming to see us. But I do take on board, as do my colleagues, they are scrutinised by so many different people, and it must take a hell of a lot of time out of their working day. So thank you very much to our first panel of guests for joining us today and for your answers to our questions. We're now going to take a short adjournment to change panels. We'll come back at 11:35. Welcome back to the Police and Crime Committee. We will now continue our discussion, and I would like to welcome our second panel of guests. Miriam Gidder, Chair of Tower Hamlets Community Monitoring Group, Colette Hunter, Vice Chair, Lewisham Safer Neighbourhood Board, and Ian Weatherly, Chair of Havering Community Monitoring Group. Welcome all. We're all going to ask different questions. I'm going to start, so I'll start with Miriam. How important is community oversight of the Metropolitan Police, and what is your experience of it?
Thank you. Well, firstly, obviously, community oversight is vital. The Met professes to have a model of policing by consent, which, by its definition, requires some community buy-in. I think, particularly speaking for Tower Hamlets, we're a borough where there is disproportionate policing, where the stop and search rates of black people are wildly disproportionate to the white population. And so I think it is so important that there is community oversight of that and work done by the community to bring that disproportionality down. To address the second part of your question, which is, I think, my experience of it, it's frankly been very challenging to have effective oversight of the Met. And I would say that's because of the Met has a real institutional defensiveness. And so what I have found in my tenure as chair, particularly in maybe the first year, was a refusal by the Met to properly engage with us, that there was constant pushback of any feedback we gave. And I think the overwhelming view was, we're the Met, we're the professionals, and what sort of experience do you have and what knowledge do you have in order to challenge us? And I don't want to go on at length, and I'm sure we can come back to this, but where it's been particularly pronounced is our group watch body-worn video footage of stop and searches, and we rate them and give feedback on them. The most serious rating we can give is a red. I've given 2 reds in my time as chair, and I think I've been chair certainly for well over a year, so it's not something we give very often. With both the reds, we've had tremendous pushback from the Met, a refusal to accept the severity of what those searches showed, and ultimately no real accountability taken for them. So we are seeing progress, but it is very slow, and I would say it's really difficult to have effective scrutiny with the Met the way that they are at the moment.
Okay. I think we'll expand on that as we go through. If not, we're certainly happy to come back to it at the end. Colette, can I ask you the same question?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us. I've been the deputy chair for Lewisham. This is my 2nd year. The relationship that we have with the Lewisham team is really well. When I said well, because they listen and they auction what we put on the table. We have a platform of transparency. We have a platform where we speak as it is, and what we've spoken about is evidential. I've been on the S&B before for 3 years, before actually becoming deputy chair. We have had situation in the borough of Lewisham with stabbings. In 1 week, between 2 weeks, we had 2 deaths. And you can just imagine the impact of families. You can just imagine the concern raised by citizens. We created an aura where the Met had no choice but to take responsibility and to help with visuality in our town centre to embrace this horrific nature. As deputy chair of Lewisham Safer Neighbourhood Board, we acknowledge and embrace the Met when they put their hands up to say, we should have done this way. We are guilty for not doing this way. So we have a platform where we say it as it is, and we call it out, and we demand answers.
Okay, so you're quite happy with the way it's working in
At the
Lewisham?
moment,
That's good.
There's always improvement.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And we're going to expand on some of the other things with the other questions.
Thank you.
Ian, what is how important is oversight to you of the Met Police, and briefly your experience?
It's extremely important for us to liaise and work with the all agencies, be it council or police, for our CMGs. I should explain also that I'm vice chair of the SMB as well, so hence the reason why I say the council as well, because not all issues are police, maybe councils or antisocial behaviour, etc. But going with my CMG head on, we have a very positive relationship with the Met Police officers, especially being in Havering. We have Romford Town Centre, has a nighttime economy, so therefore we have an influx of surrounding boroughs and personnel coming in. That can provide a disproportionate view of the stop and searches that are carried out by our Romford Town Centre teams. My liaison with the CMG and the stop and search is actually one of the police sergeants of the Romford Town Centre team. So similar to Mirren, when we watch the body-worn videos on a monthly basis, if we actually stop and dip sample some of the videos, sometimes the actual police sergeant there, Aaron Harris, actually says, oh, that's one of my team, or I know that person. However, he is then able to give a grassroots feedback and direct feedback as to that person. So, and that's not while we're watching, it's afterwards. So we don't form opinions with the police, but we discuss the actions with the police. And we take a very open and candid view, and very similar to Mirren on the body-worn videos. I've only had to raise 2 red incidences, and fortunately, they have actually been very supportive, because the points that we've pointed out, they have actually agreed, and then they've taken them on to the inspector for either personal retraining or situational review.
Okay, so sort of mixed views, which we'll expand on as we go. I'm going to ask all of you this, but it might be that it hasn't really come to your attention. So in your experience, how is MOPAC, the Mayor's Office for Policing, supported cultural change within the Met, and what is working well and where could improvements be made? Now, I've been on a Safer Neighbourhood board for over 20 years, and this sort of thing doesn't necessarily come up. So it may or may not affect you. Have any of you got any comment on that specific? Mirren?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure it will directly address your question, but I would say from my experience with MOPAC, they also face challenges in getting the Met to, I suppose, listen to what they have to say, but I think a particular challenge is in getting data and information from the Met. That's the feedback that I've had from the 3 people who support us at MOPAC. And I think that's a much bigger question of the Mayor's powers to sort of deal with the Met.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts on that specific issue, the cultural change?
Our relationship with MOPAC, it's okay. We've had visits from the office as well to our meetings in Lewisham. Sadly, the last contact we had was funding relation.
Okay, yeah, I can recognise that far more than a cultural change. So none of you have, it's not really touched you, the MOPAC's dealing with cultural change?
Not at the moment.
Okay. No?
If I may, despite asking for MOPAC to attend some of our CMG meetings and SNB meetings, I don't know if Havering is a little bit too far out of East London for them to come out, but hey, the Underground does reach us, and British Rail are there, getting there eventually. But we've not had any MOPAC attending of our meetings. The only time that we do have contact with MOPAC is via the CMN. So CMG chairs then meet together pan-London-wide for the CMN. And that's where we meet with MOPAC. And my experience is that MOPAC provide secretarial and facility.
No, that's right.
But the
we're
feedback,
being specific today in our questioning.
When we raise issues that MOPAC are aware of at the CMM meetings, I'm not aware of any feedback that they take, say, oh, that's a really good point, on a social feedback to say, oh, we'll actually get onto that. So I've not had any feedback on that, per se.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move to Assembly Member Garbutt.
Thank you. And some of this has already been picked up in some of your answers, because I wanted to push a bit more on how effective MOPAC is in providing support to the community monitoring groups. So, yeah, to make sure that you're able to do that scrutiny of the Met. I guess you've all touched on kind of this in slightly different ways, but, yeah, just some thoughts on what's working well and what isn't really. So, Miran, I'll start with you. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I put it in my bio, which I don't know if that's been sent round, but my group has adopted a different model that's being trialled in Hackney, and it gives us slightly broader powers than a CMG normally has. And in consequence of that, MOPAC has been quite heavily involved in our group, and we have welcomed that while also retaining our independence. I find that MOPAC are broadly supportive and care about, at least the MOPAC members we work with, care about effective scrutiny of the Met. The problem is, as I've said, they don't really have the authority to really push for effective change. So to give an example, at the last CMG meeting, the Met tried to row back on agreements we had reached as to how we would conduct the body-worn video viewings. And the response from MOPAC was, oh, well, we'll have to raise this down the line. It can be considered as part of the pan-London scrutiny overhaul. It's not the case that MOPAC says or is able to say, no, you agreed this with the CMG, and therefore it's going to happen. And with the second red that I mentioned, which we gave in either June or July of last year, the Met, like I mentioned, refused to accept from me that it was a red. And what ended up happening was MOPAC reviewed it and agreed with me that it was a red. And we still haven't actually had an acceptance from the Met that it was serious. We've had a 9-page letter back from a member of the TSG, because it was that unit who conducted the search, effectively finding no problems. So my feeling is MOPAC are good, they're supportive, but they don't really have much power. They don't help us get much further.
So is there what if one or two things that you'd change it within that scenario that you just described to make this function more effectively? What would they be?
Well, I think it applies for the CMGs and for MOPAC, which is that the Met has to listen to what we're saying and actually accept it, rather than constantly pushing back or saying, as I mentioned earlier, well, this is our job and we know better than you. That there has to be a commitment to working with community groups and taking on board what they say. I appreciate it's difficult to hear criticism. No one wants that. But ultimately, what it feels like at the moment is the Met is saying, well, we want scrutiny and we're open to community oversight, but then they're not following through with their actions. And that fundamentally has to change, because otherwise all of the money that's being spent on transforming community scrutiny is going to be a waste. It lies with the Met to listen and actually act on what communities and MOPAC are saying.
Thank you. And Colette, you've described a slightly different scenario where you feel like you're kind of listened to, but in terms, and I know you started speaking about this in the formal response, so yeah, do you feel like MOPAC are providing you with that support and the mechanisms to hold the Met to account?
MOPAC, on my observation and their contribution to our platform in Lewisham, they have had a physical presence in our, delivery. For example, we have been funded projects in the borough that helps with cultural changes and embracing differences associated with victims of violence. And unfortunately, this year that funding has been cut, you know. So how will this transform to organizations that rely on this is another force to reckon with. But we have had situations where representatives made themselves present in meetings to deal with altercations and situations that need a different view. So what I would say in relation to MOPAC and their contribution to our platform in Lewisham, it was a positive one. However, the lack of funding, I don't know how that is going to resonate with the groups that rely on this. But I would say that we have a relationship with them that hopefully will extend beyond funding and open another platform of care for communities in Lewisham.
Thank you. And Ian, do you have any comments on this around the way that MOPAC enables you to hold the Met to account, or any mechanisms that would help?
Within the community monitoring network side, the liaison with MOPAC, as I say, has been, in my view, purely secretarial, i.e. the funding, the facilitation of the MOPAC or the CMN meetings. I've not seen any feedback of, OK, you said you've raised this issue, this is what we're going to do, this is why we're going to hold the Met Police's feet to the fire, as it were. And there's a lack of communication saying, oh, thank you for raising that point, and actually, because of that, we have then done this, and this has been the result. So we've lost that communication chain and the feedback. It's almost like I also refer to it as sort of like you said we did. And it's something that we're trying to actually take up in Havering, because otherwise people get apathy and saying, well, there's no point in me saying it because you don't do anything about it. But if somebody can actually point out, actually, because of what you said, we did this and this is the result, perhaps they're more likely to work with you and to be part of the solution.
Yeah, that's really clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we go to our next Assembly member, I would just like to say hello to the staff and school council from Geary's Primary School, and that's in Redbridge. Hello. So you've joined us when we're actually talking to our guests about the Metropolitan Police. So thank you for joining us today. Now I'd like to go over to Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My question is to you, Miran, and to you, Ian. So one of the ultimate criticisms of the Casey review was, and I quote, there was not a clear way for local authorities and their residents to hold the Met to account for how they police and tackle crime on a borough basis. Is this still the case, Ian?
Good question. Obviously, I'll put my Safer Neighbourhood Board head on with this case, because this is where we do have a very good relationship with the police and, as I said earlier, the council as well, because not every issue at a borough level is to deal with the police. Obviously, we're looking at antisocial behaviour here as well, and sometimes it could be a council issue where antisocial behaviour then grows. We've had some very good relationships and feedbacks and some actions to nip these in the bud, certainly with the Safer Neighbourhood teams as well, where I'm part of the ward panel as well. Going back to the point that was made earlier in the panel, the Commissioner's view of neighbourhood policing being key. If we can stop those small issues snowballing into larger ones, and especially in my borough, I live outside of like the Romford town centre, but so often the police has to nip one issue in the bud, and then of course it raises somewhere else and somewhere else. But if we can learn the lessons of nip it in the bud and not just move it on, but to resolve it, saves it re-erecting itself in other parts of the borough. So we don't want to just move it on. We want to sort of like resolve the issue and then maintain that quality of life for the community.
Before bringing Miran, perhaps I should ask you, Colette, for your views as well, from a Lewisham perspective.
The Casey review, this has been brought up in several conversations, and how I personally feel about this is hidden agendas that lingers in the Met. We look at the Metropolitan Police and we see them as a figure of authority, a figure that should be respected. But oftentimes, we are not touching the human side of these individuals, that their issues. And the KC reviews bring this out into the opening for us to acknowledge and accept and should make the necessary changes and to implement these changes to show that we care what's happening in the Metropolitan Police, because we're talking about human beings in a uniform that signify authority and respect. But we need to accept that there are grounds of changes to be made.
Thank you. Colette, sorry, Mirren.
Thank you. I wouldn't go as far as to say that there's no effective scrutiny. I think positively, once a month, we're able to watch body-worn video footage of stop and searches and give critical feedback. And every 2 months, we have a 2-hour meeting with the police. And I think in particular, the feedback that we give, which goes to the officers who conducted the searches, does at least make them aware that there is community scrutiny of what they're doing. So I think to that extent, there is some level of scrutiny. I think the issue is, my group has clear goals, which is to bring down disproportionality in Tower Hamlets, particularly against the black members of our community, and also to improve, or drastically improve, the way that the Met are doing stop and searches, so not using handcuffs as the norm, not targeting vulnerable drug users, for example. These are quite big goals for a group of only 14 people to achieve. And I think the problem is, as I've said, when we do push at things, when we do give reds, that's when we get the pushback. And just one other point I would make. I looked at some figures, and I apologise, they're not as up-to-date as I would like, but when you look at stop and search rates from the 1st of December 2024 to the end of November 2025 in Tower Hamlets, at the start of December 24, there were 479 stop and searches, and a year on, it was up to 616. Now, my group's been active during that time, trying to improve how stop and search is used, which would include in our group's objectives bringing down stop and search rates. And when I asked the police, well, why is there this increase? Because we're seeing it every time we meet for the monthly body-worn video viewings. There's more and more videos to dip sample. They said, well, we've been running all these other operations concurrently, and that's brought up the rate of stop and search. So I think that's the challenge. We're one group seeking to do certain things. The Met has its own objectives. There are also other groups in the borough who have different goals. The Safer Neighbourhoods Board does take a different approach to us. And I think if I can really drive home one message, it's scrutiny groups really need a clearer purpose, because the picture across London is very fragmented as well.
So, just to carry on very briefly, Chair, Lord Scom in his inquiry published in 1982 recommended that each borough should have a properly constituted, on a statutory basis, a police community consultative group. Would something like that help? Because right now you've got SNB, IAGs, all do different things. But there's nothing comparable to those consultative groups that existed for most of the 1980s.
I think it would help hugely. A member of my group in the last meeting asked us, she's a trainee lawyer, what the statutory basis is for our group. Yeah. And I think, you know, if we have a power mandated in statute, it makes it a lot easier for us to say to the Met as well, you need to listen.
Yeah. Colette, very briefly again.
To be honest with you, the more, well, I was going to say the more slices in the pizza, but the more individuals or group that you have given a different voice and opinion will make a difference. Because remember, we're looking at different race, different faith groups that are out there. When you look at what's happening in our community, how we're associated in our community, having a scrutiny group of different elements of care, of concern, will also help. Because if you look on surveys that have been conducted, we're looking at cultural changes, where do we get the data from? Do we visit all these groups that make up our community? Do we get these surveys, voices from the young people? Do we get these surveys? A commission report was submitted from an organization in Lewisham, and when this report was submitted, it was stated detail that was missing from records that was essential to get the correct voices. So the more scrutiny groups that we have out there across our community will help.
And Ian?
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. I disagree with that. I agree that we should be open to all aspects of the community, but we have to bear in mind that the community monitoring group is dealing with stop and search only. You've got the IAG, totally different remit and totally different terms of reference, and you've got the Safer Neighbourhood Board, again, totally different areas of it. As the community monitoring group chair, I have an input into my SNB, but only just to inform them of how the stop and search is going on. The police are there and they actually take that on board. So I believe that the SNB is where the community comes together, but each different group, I think it would be wrong to actually have one group that has overall responsibility over stop and search, IAG views, because IAG looks at the independent advisories, what should happen in the future, whereas stop and search is looking at what has happened in the past and then looking at ways to make things better.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I come on to Assembly Member Small Edwards? I'm sorry, some of your questions have been encroached upon.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, my question is on stop and search. We touched on it a bit there, but it's slightly different, I think. In your experience, and I'll start with Mirren and then go down the panel, if that's okay. In your experience, how effective is this MOPAC's oversight of the culture of stop and search?
I think that's a difficult one for me to answer, but I'm afraid I just don't have the answer. It's similar to Ms Hall's question. I don't think we have that understanding of how MOPAC's driving cultural change.
In your borough, then, what's your assessment of how stop and search is being undertaken?
By the Met, you mean? We have concerns, basically, about how stop and search is being done. I think those concerns are threefold. As I've said, there is disproportionality in how searches are being conducted. It's particularly stark against black people in Tower Hamlets. It's also disproportionate against Asian people in Tower Hamlets. The second is we are seeing handcuffs being used routinely, which is not how handcuffs should be used. They are still a use of force. And what we're also seeing concurrent with that is that use of force forms are not being completed when officers are handcuffing people. And then I would say the third point we're seeing is increased use of stop and search. And as I mentioned, particularly against vulnerable drug users. So we have quite a high rate of stop and searches for drugs as opposed to weapons. The challenges, and I'm not sure how well you know how the body-worn viewings work, but we can usually only watch a few in the 2-hour viewing. So it's hard to have a complete oversight of what's going on. I do use the Met's dashboard to try and get the broader picture. But those are the themes that we're seeing, and I realised I aired earlier, I've been chair for over 2 years, so the theme, yes, well, quite. So the themes that we're seeing are the disproportionality, the use of handcuffing, and the focus on sort of low-level drug searches.
Claire?
No comment in relation to the stop and search. I've been and viewed a couple, but no details to share with you today.
No problem at all. Thank you. Ian, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, sure. We're quite interested in, obviously, this excuse me, breaking these teeth in, for Mirren's point about disproportionality, absolutely key for all stop and search areas. And one of the things that we've noticed is that, again, the apportionality of race, colour, etc., previously was done by the actual officer. So a lot of focus we've put on in Havering is about the self-defined ethnicity. So that should be a part of where and I'll use the term, the person being stopped, I won't say suspect, but the person being stopped should have the opportunity to say, how do you define yourself? And with working with the actual Met Police, we've actually adopted a common phrase of, I identify myself as white British, how would you identify yourself? And we've seen on the body-worn videos from black Afro-Caribbean, black American, Asian, white Asian even, white British. So all of these ethnicities are actually able to be notified, but that takes the onus onto the individual rather than the officer who just assumes, oh, you're white British. He might be Polish, he might be Irish. So all that ethnicity could be absolutely misshapen, but we've got to go back to the self-defined ethnicity part from the actual individual, because otherwise I think our disproportionality figures are just blown out of the water.
So you're saying that when conducting a stop and search, you think the Met should ask that as like a first question?
Not as a first question, but as part of the dialogue, I think. Part of the Go Wisely is, a structure. If you're aware of that, please, otherwise we'll go through it all. But the Go Wisely is sort of a format about the grounds for the search, where the officer comes from, etc. But part of that, if we're having so much on, disproportionality, we felt that it was really, really key to get back to the grassroots. Don't assume, ask the individual how they define their self-ethnicity.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. What I sometimes find quite depressing about discussions about stop and search is that it always seems to be talked about in a negative context, and I know there are issues about sensitivities and so on, and obviously it has to be done with those in mind. But fundamentally, I'm concerned that discussions like this, we lose sight of the key fact that actually this is a valuable technique that the police have at their disposal. It does have a proven track record of taking weapons and other things off the streets. So I would just ask, would all three of you on the panel accept that, if done properly, stop and search is an absolutely crucial part of the armoury that police have? Because fundamentally, we can talk about all sorts of priorities, but all of us involved in whatever level in policing or oversight of the policing should have as our number one priority to tackle crime. I would have thought perhaps that's dangerously radical, who knows? But welcome your thoughts on that, please.
No, absolutely share your points on that. And just to set the scene, Havering, to the east of the borough, east of the city, is one of the elderly and predominantly whitest boroughs in London. And the feedback that we've had from our SMBs and our panels is that we welcome stop and search. It is a valuable tool to drive crime and to find and remove weapons from the streets. And if done correctly, and I'll make that point, and I'm sure Mirren and Colette will actually back me up on this, it has to be done effectively. And the recent actual stats that I've actually come with today is that the numbers of stop and searches have actually gone down across London, but the actual criminality detected rate has actually increased. So I think that the actual numbers of stop and searches have gone down, but we're finding more because they're being targeted correctly. Now, again, I can only speak for my borough, because, as we've said earlier, every borough is differently. And I don't want to sort of like just say, oh, this one solution fits all. It doesn't. It has to be done correctly and done with the consent of the population. But, stop and searches do work. And if done correctly, and again, the reasons for that are actually explained to the individual. Oh, look, you're in a known hotspot, or we've seen you actually dealing, or we've seen you coming out, or we've seen you put something down your trousers or that. I mean, some of the body-worn videos I've seen, it just beggars belief as to how you can actually run and think you can run away from police with a 2-foot machete unsheathed down your trousers. I've seen it. And it just beggars belief how they think they can get away with it. But we've got to get these weapons and that off the streets for our community's sake.
Ian, thank you so much for making reference to the figures as well. Stop and search, we need it. We need it. We need it on our streets. If it's done properly, that is. I've been doing 10 years of stop and search in schools with the young people with the Metropolitan Police in Lewisham. And they've recently, the last workshop we did, they literally had a PowerPoint presentation and they did a role-playing exercise as well with the young people. They also demonstrate to them, you are stopped because of a reason. Someone reported a young boy with a rucksack, it was red. He described African boy, your height, your age. However, when we look in your bag, you only had a metal ruler. So it was just showing the demonstration. So you didn't have a knife, but we wanted to explain to you why you were stop and search. So if this is done in a respected manner, one of the things that came out of a few of the workshop is the embarrassment of being stopped. Maybe this can be looked into a policy change, maybe how you treat the young person. Do you really need to put the handcuffs on? He's only 13. He's not going to run there for you, and he's here with you, and you question him, but you don't need to put the cuffs on. So they express that feeling of embarrassment. How it's done, it's an effective tool if it's used wisely with respect, understanding the culture of our young people, the embarrassment that they will feel with everyone passing on the double-decker bus, looking at them, using the phone, taking pictures and videotaping the moments. If we think about little things like this and adjust it a bit, we strike gold on the street, how it's done. That's my view.
Thank you. I think respectfully, I'm not sure how. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of your question, because the point of this briefing, as I understand it, is to talk about culture change within the Met. And the three of us are here to tell you about our work scrutinising the Met. Your question asking us to say whether or not we think stop and search is effective is not really what we're here to discuss. I'd much rather speak to you about the work we do scrutinising the Met. What I see in Tower Hamlets is a high rate of searches that don't find anything, and then the community distrust and the community hurt that is caused by stop and searches. And my job is to ensure that the Met acts lawfully, reasonably and proportionately. And I'd much rather discuss that work than engage in whether or not stop and search is effective or not. That's not really the remit of my role.
Okay, I appreciate that. But in scrutinising the Met and the way that these things are carried out on the ground, surely part of that is to make sure that the tools they use are used fairly, proportionately, but also effectively. And I think as the other two panel members have confirmed, they do view it as a worthwhile tool. I think most of us here would. Take on board the points about, yes, it needs to be done sensitively, and lots of discussion about that. But fundamentally, if something is worth doing, and it's worth doing well, it's worth doing because it has a purpose, it has a result, it's proven to take weapons off the streets, and fundamentally that's what we all want to see. We want to see our streets safer for everybody, and I don't think it does anybody any favours to hide, anybody from any community, any favours to hide from that and to not get those weapons off the street. But
okay.
I think back to you, Chair.
Okay. Just to go over this, it's clear that lots of you aren't, or none of you are aware really of the job of MOPAC to look at cultural issues, because it hasn't touched you, and we've all picked up on that. But we really want to ask you questions that interest us with your work, because we're so grateful for the work that you do. You're all volunteers, and so stop and search is a really big thing for the Met, and it's very interesting to get your thoughts on it. So we've all got different views on it. For transparency, I'm massively for stop and search for lots of the same reasons as Assemblymember Wilson. But the reason we've asked you is cultural change. But just because you don't know about that, which is fair enough, you've got a wealth of information that all of us are very grateful to hear. So I'll now go into Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. I just wonder, we've kind of touched on this a bit, but I wanted to come to Stop and Search, and especially, Marion, you're looking at this data, and I know instances. What is a positive outcome of a poor performance? What does a positive outcome look like?
Just to clarify, do you mean when we give feedback to the Met, what would be a positive outcome of that feedback?
Yes, so once that feedback is taken, obviously the event is not positive. Once the feedback is taken on board and action is presumably taken, what does that look like? What does good action look like?
Thanks. So with the rating system that we have green, which is where a stop and search was done well, and that feedback's passed back to the officer. We have a neutral, which is just, it was fine. We have amber, and the outcomes of an amber for us is that the officer's next 3 searches will be reviewed by a line manager, and if there are any further problems identified, that would be addressed with the officer. And they can also go through something called the learning through reflection process if the amber is sort of serious enough. Things that might trigger an amber is the officer not complying with Go Wisely, equally not complying with the requirements of PACE, which are embedded in Go Wisely. Where we struggle is, again, with the reds, because we don't have a clear outcome for what should happen when we give something a red. The issue with that, and I appreciate this might go beyond sort of the Mayor's scope, is that what I've been told is, in law, we don't have the status of a complainant, which means we can't make a complaint with the Met to be considered by its internal review mechanism. We also can't go to the IOPC because we're not complainants. And that leaves us a bit stuck. And this is a massive problem for scrutiny groups. And it's probably the main thing I would really like to be addressed if we are going to overhaul the model. Because really, when it is that serious, what you want is an effective disciplinary process and possibly IOPC involvement. With the first red that I reviewed, which was in January 2024, which is how I realised I'd been doing this role for longer than I thought, eventually the Met agreed to look at it internally with its Directorate of Professional Standards. The outcome was that they found no issues with it. It involved, in my view, disproportionate use of force against a 15-year-old. It is one of the most serious things I've watched. And then when I asked for the Met to explain to me why they held the use of force was in accordance with the law, I was told I couldn't have that explanation. I have no understanding of why we disagree so strongly. And that has to change. But with the second red, again, I've had a 9-page letter back from TSG disagreeing with me, and at the moment it feels like it's going to just stop there. So there hasn't actually been effective outcomes for either of those reds, and that's really of concern.
Okay. Can I take it then, if there was a 9-page letter the second time, there was reasons given the second time?
Yeah.
Slightly would be better than the first occasion, if not.
No, definitely. And I was saying that in my last group meeting to the new members, that even though it might feel that we haven't got much further, we have. But what I would like to see is that when my group gives something a red, that is accepted, that it doesn't have to be reviewed by MOPAC. It was also reviewed by the Haringey CMG before the Met would then take it seriously. That undermines me and my group if effectively we have to be peer reviewed. And I've also said to the Met, I would like it that if, when we get a red, we say we do want this to go to the Directorate of Professional Standards, that is done. And what I was told in my last meeting was, no, we're not going to do that, because this was a Met person saying this, it would effectively fetter our discretion, but that's not quite right, because we're saying, no, as the CMG, we would like it to be referred. So yes, we're in a slightly better position 2 years on, but it's not much better.
Yeah, thank you. And Colette, Ian, is there anything that you would add to that?
To be honest with you, our CMG group in Lewisham has been doing a bit of a reshuffling. I actually had a meeting yesterday with the vice chair, and they're looking at their platform and terms of reference that they have with MOPAC. The last body-worn video that I saw, we were given feedback on, because it's like random videos. You don't know what you're going to watch when you go into these, our platform, that is. And after such delivery, we're given this feedback as to say what, you know, did the officer, the force, we tick the boxes and everything, which we have done that bit. And this is then given to the head of the Lewisham police team that's, you know, responsible for this area. I haven't had any response negative as yet. Might be some there lingering, but my personal experience, I haven't had any negative response that we have to be dealing with at this moment.
Anything you'd add on what you see as a positive outcome?
Well, I'm sitting here counting my blessings that I think we've got an amazing, my luck must be in, because out of the, as I said to Miriam, I've had vast experience over, I think Havering were one of the trial sites for body-worn video for cameras being put in. So we've had it for probably about 8 to 10 years. So we've been watching these body-worn videos for an awful long time. And I've seen videos that have been particularly bad, not necessarily going down the severeness of raising it to a police, you know, operating outside of the police rules, but I've also had the really good stops, and it was almost, we actually wrote a letter of commendation to the borough commander on this female police officer, and she acted almost like a sisterly touch. And that was exactly how I would want my daughter, if she was ever stopped and searched, I'd want her to be stopped and searched by this female officer, you know? It's one of those things that I look at every body-worn video, would I want my son or daughter or grandchild to be stopped like that? If I'm thinking, that's a bit harsh, okay, that might go down as, say, Miriam said, like an amber. If it's a, well, that's well out of order, then obviously that goes down as a red. But then you've got to distinguish, was it their attitude, which may be cultural? Was it procedural, where it could be, for instance, outside of the pace or go wisely? That is obviously then educational on that officer. That then should be raised to the sergeant and the inspector, that that particular police officer needs to be looked at procedurally, you know, and looked at. Now, I'm lucky that we haven't gone down any serious ones of that nature. But as I say, we've written letters of commendation on several, I think 3 or 4, but there's 2 reds. The majority of, I've been lucky enough, the majority have been pretty good.
It's good to hear that it's mainly the positive.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm counting my blessings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Apologies, Lord Bailey. A lot of yours has been covered, but I'll pass it over to you to see what you can salvage.
That's fine, Chair. I'm going to start with Miriam. In what ways do you could greater scrutiny of body-worn video samples be used to prevent abuse, such as what happened at Charing Cross? Those ways as well. And a sort of particular question to you. You talked about your goal to be to reduce disproportionate stop and search. How much conversation did you have with your local police officers about your goal? Because there could be a tension between your goal and their goals, couldn't they? And that could give you some indication of why listening to your relationship could be better with them. So if we start there.
Absolutely, yes. So to answer your question on how body-worn video can be used to sort of flag incidents of abuse or notice problems, when I said that my group's adopted a new model, one of the things we're able to do, which other CMGs are not, is we can now have thematic body-worn video viewings. So what that means is if, for example, people in the community said, we've noticed tasers being used a lot. This is just hypothetical, that hasn't been said. We could specifically ask to only watch in a given viewing stops that involve the use of tasers. We haven't yet done the thematic viewings, only because we've only sort of recently, but that's one way that we can look at things. I think, again, the issue is because you can only fit a small number into a viewing, the other thing that groups need to be able to do is really look at the data. So if in a situation where I was being told taser use has gone up, I would also be, well, not using the dashboard because I'm not sure that would help, but probably FOIing to find out, okay, well, is that right and what's going on? To answer your second question about having conversations with local police officers, so every 2 months my group meets with our inspector, and usually either a chief superintendent comes or a senior inspector, I can't remember his title. So we do have that sort of FaceTime with them. And I would say the relationship is better than it was. There is always going to be an inherent tension when you're scrutinising and criticising, and I want my group members to be confident to challenge the police. We have, in the last meeting, we addressed the fact that stop and searches have gone up quite considerably, and I asked them to, in as much as they can, provide reasons for that. I'm also, I've been in contact with Dave Lamb, who's a senior, I think, inspector in Hackney, about some attempts that Hackney police made to bring down disproportionality. So we're in the early days of kind of looking at what we can achieve. I think you're right that there may indeed be a tension in us saying, well, we want to bring down disproportionality, we don't want to see as many stop and searches, and then the fact that Tower Hamlets is running lots of different operations. With our model, my understanding is we're able to look beyond stop and search, so I think that might help. But again, I go back to the point that we are only one community group. We are going to be limited in what we can do. But I think it starts with having those conversations and trying to find out, okay, well, what's driving this and what can be done to undo that?
Thank you for your answer. I only say that because I've been a community worker for over 35 years now, and the problem with any community work is the usual suspects. So you get a small group of people who claim to represent the whole community, and then they can do very particular things as they're in the correct room. But my little pushback would be, shouldn't the goal be to make people safer? So, for instance, a comment was made earlier by two of your colleagues that stop and searches have gone down, but the effectiveness of them have gone up. But the product of that, the disproportionality that I think that has faced down is the fact that black people, for instance, are 4 times more likely to be murdered than their neighbour. Black men are the most murdered group of people in all of Europe. And stop and search has been a big part of reducing that. So having a goal that removes a thing that's important in that seems, I've tried to find a kind word, churlish, rather than focusing on what is the end goal. Because if it was to make people safe and stop and search was part of that and you wanted to see it done better, I can see the point. But to have a goal just to remove a tactic that, quite frankly, can easily be pointed to deliver safety for a particular group of people seems to me why the police would push back so much. I happen to agree with you. I think one of the Met's biggest problems is this institutional defensiveness. I believe that is from top to bottom. I happen to agree with you. But are you creating a situation by having a stated goal that invokes their defensiveness is what I'm asking.
Well, the goal is to reduce disproportionality. And I think you and I are in agreement that disproportionality is obviously not a good thing and that should be tackled. To be clear, that is how we have expressed it. It's not saying, you must reduce stop and searches. We're saying you need to address disproportionality. An inevitable outcome of that, one would hope, is that the number of searches would go down. And when we talk about safety, it cuts both ways. You've talked about, and I completely understand that, the safety of people not to be harmed, not to be the victims of crime. I also think about the safety of people who are subject to stop and search, who are subject to disproportionate and sometimes unlawful policing. So that's the focus that my group has. I wanted as well, if I may, just to address a point you made about how groups can become dominated, because I think that's a really valid concern. And what we have done with my group is we're always recruiting, but I have reached out specifically to community groups, inviting them to apply. We have a group that I think and hope is representative of the community, that is diverse. And what I'm encouraging my members to do is feel empowered to speak up. I don't want to run a group that is, say, dominated by me or some of the more experienced members. I have arranged training for my group. That is something where MOPAC actually could support and to some extent have supported, because they help to fund the training. But what I would say, respectfully, Lord Bailey, is while groups can be dominated by individuals, and that is obviously of concern, I think it's also very intimidating for group members to challenge the Met Police. They come to our meetings in uniform, which is absolutely fine and understandable. For I think many group members, they are not used to being critical of the police. And it's about, well, how do we create a space where they can be critical and where they will be listened to? And that's where I go back to my point of we need the Met to drop that institutional defensiveness and be willing to listen to community concerns.
Where I agree with you, I do think it can be intimidating to question police. So these groups, for me, are vital. The challenge with any group is not the way it looks, it's the way it thinks. You can have a multiplicity of people, but if they all think the same way, you have no diversity at all. I regularly point out to the fact that politics is dominated by the educated middle classes who get their way. And actually, the most important part of disproportionality is the outcomes. So disproportionately, black people, poor people are the victims of crime. When we're talking about stop and search, we're talking about street crime, so that's black men, right, and young men. And if that disproportionately means black men and young men need to be engaged by police, well then long live disproportionality, because the upside of that disproportionality is that we don't get murdered. And let's be clear, being stopped by the police, which I have been done several times, is uncomfortable, but it's better than being murdered. So when we ask what can MOPAC do about that, we're very interested in, have you seen MOPAC? Will they fund the training? What should the mayor be asking the police to do? That's the things that we're focused on. What can the mayor be asking the police to do that will help you answer the questions around safety? But Chair, back to you.
Okay. Did you want a brief comment?
Briefly on that, Lord Bailey, you make an absolute point there. Personally, safety is paramount. I don't care personally whether that person is white, black, yellow, green, pink, blue spots. If the police have a lawful suspicion that that person is carrying a weapon, going back to Councillor Williams' point, you know, they should be stopped and searched. If they've got nothing to hide, absolutely. One of the things that I think MOPAC could help us with, and it goes on to your last comment, that I'm glad you made because you could have been reading over my shoulder. Currently, CMGs are only allowed to dip sample in a month. So it's literally, you get your lottery numbers out, okay, you've got 300 stops in that month, I'll have 1, 17, 27, right the way through. What I would love to do, because predominantly a lot of them are drug searches in my borough, and it could be that in one evening, 1 2-hour period, all you'll get is a Section 23 Misuse of Drugs Act search, Section 23, Section 23. And to my mind, we are not gauging the effectiveness of the police force like that. What I've asked for is the ability to say, right, let me select one Section 23 drug search, let me see one, say, use of force, where force has been used, which again is all on the system. So again, I think the previous questions, you know, the Met Police has all this data. We should be able to, you know, filter that out. I want to use one, and taking Mirren's point, one use of, say, taser, where taser has been used or even drawn or even red dot, because obviously I think there's 6 levels of taser use. And another one, when a bladed weapon is found. So if we could actually say, in a month, let's have one of each of those. That would give us a better representation of how the Met Police are dealing with it, because otherwise, all I'm seeing is drug stop, drug stop, drug stop, drug stop. That, to me, you know, if I've seen one, okay, I don't want to make, you know, judgmentations like on one stop, but it would be much better for the CMG to say, I've got a rounded experience of 6 other stops of those different categories, if you see what I mean. And I'd love MOPAC to come down on our side, because I've raised the point to the police and they've said, well, currently our guidelines don't allow you to pick and choose. But I think that would be open and transparent use of scrutiny across the piece.
Okay, Chair, that sounds like a strong recommendation for
It certainly
our
does.
report.
It certainly does.
Thank you.
I know everybody's making notes. Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Duval.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the panel in the way that you've answered previous questions. Let's turn back to relationships and from your different points of views, both from the monitoring group and Safer Neighbourhood Boards. So independent advisory groups operating both pan-London as well as locally based ones. Can you just describe your interactions with them, if you have any interactions, and just comment around those interactions? Give us a picture of how those interactions have taken place.
I'll go first, because it's very easy. I have only a working knowledge of the IAGs, because some of the panel members on the Safer Neighbourhood Board, the IAG rep gives a feedback into the Safer Neighbourhood Board, so they would be the ones that go out to or get involved into, say for instance, gold groups by the Met Police to say, look, this is what we've done, do you think that's the right thing to do? That's my supposition of how the IAGs work, but my lack of knowledge of them is I let that group deal with their own areas. My speciality is stop and search and the Safer Neighbourhood Board. Thank you.
My experience with the IAG, as Ian mentioned, quite similar. They attend our meeting and give an update. I actually sit in their meeting as well. And I recognize the platform and relationship that they have with the police. And I note that they always have an open forum where they ask for support and advice as well. They try to bring a platform where communication, like introduction to TASER training, and so I'm actually listed to do that as well. So it's more like a communicative platform for me. And Lord Bailey had asked a question, what should we say to the police? What message we should pass on to MOPAC? What MOPAC should say to the police is more transparency is needed. I was listening to the meeting earlier, and you had mentioned for the police station to be open for the public, for the community to come in and see what goes on in there, because this is how the relationship can start to build, where you can see how they work, what they do, to understand the commitment and the cultural difference that they make. I was in the terrorist van the other night. I didn't sleep from morning till night. I was with the team, and within that, out with them that 3 night, we rescued 2 young girls that were held captive in a house. We chased a man who jumped over a fence. We went to a house with a woman trying to cut her throat. The guys had to get dressed in the TASER outfit to go in. And if the community see what goes on, what the police do on our street, they'll understand and be a little bit more humane and can share how they feel and build trust and confidence. And that's what the Met is trying to do right now. But opening up their doors and bringing the public in is one way of gaining the trust and building confidence, So, yeah, the IAG, we listen and we communicate as well through that platform.
I'm sorry, we don't have interactions really with the SNB and IAG. I'm on the SNB mailing list, but that's something we need to work on.
Okay, so you're really not in a position to comment on your perception of effectiveness, except in the sense your interactions, you're quite pleased with the interactions that you're having. Can I just ask, really, of the monitoring groups, do you ever come together to share those that exist in London, to do either joint training or just share experiences of your work?
Yeah, the chairs of each borough CMG come together to work together in the CMN, Community Monitoring Network. I've been fortunate enough, I had the chair of that for 2 years, and that was really good forum to actually share best practice. What works in your borough? What works in yours? Oh, that's a good idea. So that has been a good... prior to COVID, it worked very well because Mopac chaired them at the old City Hall, and we had a very large area where we could have these meetings, and that worked really well. We were able to get some of the Met Police liaison teams in as well to have speeches by them. Again, that worked really well. With the current situation after COVID and the move of locations, we just haven't had that facility. So one of the things is that we are using the offices at Union Street, the Metropolitan Fire Brigade offices, and I'm not kidding, if you've got 12 people in there, it's crowded. Now, I don't see how you can actually have a facility. To be honest, we'd need somewhere like this to hold our meetings. If you've got sort of like, you know, the 32 boroughs, each chair coming in with guests, you'd need something like this to be a workable working group. If Mopac could take that on board, please hire a bigger room.
And the Safer Neighbourhood boards are meeting London-wide, aren't they?
No, Safer Neighbourhood boards meet in each borough. I don't believe they come together. But again, my Safer Neighbourhood board asked for Mopac to come along, and Mopac said no.
So Mopac deals individually, one-to-one, rather than collectively.
Yeah. So the SMBs are working in isolation, whereas the CMGs are working together under the CMN.
But do you not feel that? Because sometimes even working in the boroughs, rightly the focus should be on that borough that you're working in. But when you come together and sharing those experiences, does that not help in terms of best practice and sharing problems? Because someone else's problem has probably been a problem elsewhere that's been worked through.
No, absolutely. I'll take your point, and perhaps that should be another forum for the Safer Neighbourhood boards to come together in the way that CMGs do.
Colette, could you comment on whether Safer Neighbourhood boards, would you welcome hearing experiences or sharing experiences with other Safe Neighbourhood boards in terms of best practice issues?
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. The closest I've been coming together with the 32 boroughs here is at the Metropolitan meeting that we have, the 999 and 101 call scrutiny. I sit on that. I represent Lewisham out of the 32 boroughs in this meeting, and this is the closest I've been to connecting with the other boroughs. Yeah. So welcoming a platform for SNB.
And just one final very quick question, just to clarity, if I can go back to the independent advisory groups. If I've got this wrong, please correct me. So I think I understand your status, so we know it's slightly different. You're at different levels and different issues in terms of the monitoring groups, and I certainly understand about the Safer Neighbourhood boards. I was involved in consultative groups many years ago, not recently, and I know things have changed. IAGs, whether they're pan-London or independent, are the creatures, if I can describe it in a nice way, not in a hostile way, are creatures of the Metropolitan Police? Or do you think they're truly independent?
It's an independent body, as far as I'm concerned.
I know as far as you're concerned, and the experiences that you've had, right? And so you don't see it as being part of the Metropolitan Police Service issues. Do you think it is independent?
For example, when they actually do a formal introduction at SNB meeting, they introduce themselves as an independent advisory group, if that helps. That's how they introduce themselves.
I don't know if this assists with your question, but it used to be that both myself as chair of the CMG and the IAG would be notified when the Met in Tower Hamlets were thinking of implementing a Section 60. And the decision was made by the Met to no longer tell me. And the reason they gave, which I don't really agree with, is that because my job is scrutiny, I shouldn't be feeding in to whether a Section 60 should be implemented. I should only scrutinise it once it has gone into effect. I understand the semantics of that, but I personally felt like I had value to give before the Section 60 was implemented. But I say that as perhaps that helps understand at least Tower Hamlets' thinking of the difference between the IAG and the CMG. And I think that the police in our borough see the IAG as, yes, advisory and us as scrutiny. But Lord Duval, I just also wanted to ask, just with regards to what you were saying about sort of pan-London, are you referring to the proposed plan for how things are going to change? Or is that not?
I was talking about the here and now, but in terms of there are Metropolitan Police Service, Pan-London, IAG groupings who offer advice to the Metropolitan Police Service. I mean, it is important, Chair, if we could follow up, because I understand how you've all arrived at your various positions in terms of interest you've shown, volunteer work, or come forward to sit and offer your services. Sometimes I'm unclear about IAGs, of whether they've been invited by the Metropolitan Police Service to become independent members, i.e. locally. Things may have moved on, but over the many years, it used to be that the police would approach people to become independent advisors. I hope that's changed, because I thought it was one of the weaknesses of the past.
Perhaps we should have had a chair for the IAG member.
Disrespect. I mean, no disrespect to IAGs. They do a lot of very important work, as you do. But how we arrive at those positions, it's just of interest. Chair, maybe we could follow it up in a written way.
But just to assure you, I mean, as you know, Jeanette is assiduous in this. We did reach out, or rather, staff reached out and we didn't get any response, but certainly I think we should look into that. Assembly Member Roberts, I apologise, you don't have very long.
That's quite all right, Chair, I'll be quick. Good afternoon. This is a question for Colette. Colette, right at the very beginning you started mentioning the less communication you had from MOPAC was regarding funding. I've been contacted recently by somebody who's informed me that my local SMB, MOPAC won't be funding it anymore. It's going to be handed under the Met, which maybe I wasn't paying attention in these meetings, but that came as some news to me. Is that your understanding of the situation as well?
Yes, that's correct. That's the latest communication we received. That this was the last funding that we received. Okay. And I suppose it have to do with cuts with the budget, because even our admin. There was a little note to say even our admin might be reduced as well, or costing.
And what will the removal of that funding mean for your ability to operate?
This is exactly what I was just saying, because the funding that we received was used instrumentally in the borough with the groups that's associated with antisocial behaviour, victims of violence that are going through, issues, and our young people. So the feedback or the impression I get is that there will be other platforms in the borough that will probably have funding that these organizations will have to challenge, but maybe something will magically happen and they may just send another letter to say we have reviewed and we have changed and you will funding will be continued.
Was there any consultation with you before this, or did you just receive a...
No, we just got a letter.
Just a letter?
Sent, yeah.
Yeah, you seem to... Yes.
If I may. Interesting that you brought that up, because I've heard that on the grapevine, and I didn't want to mention it in case it was true, because I've heard, again, whispers on the grapevine, that it may be that the Metropolitan Police are trying to combine the CMGs and the SMBs together. As I've said earlier, I think that would be a mistake, because each, be it CMG, SMB or IAG, have totally different roles and responsibilities. and different targets and different terms of reference. Bringing them together, I think, would muddy the waters, lose your focus on stop and search. And SMB, as I said before, you're looking at the Metropolitan Police, you're looking at the council, we're looking at different, certainly my own SMB, we've got church leaders coming into it, different faith leaders, Salvation Army, because everybody works together in our borough for harmony. And, you know, you can't just say, oh, that's your fault or your fault or your fault. We've got to work together to eliminate these problems. And also it would be a case of, if we're bringing all these groups together and MOPAC reduces, or it goes from MOPAC to the Metropolitan Police, in Havering we've had, I think it's around about 4 projects funded by MOPAC in the last year. And those have gone on after schools projects for the youth. We've got an anti-scammer workshop for our elderly. Yep. Because obviously that's another big thing about scamming online. So all of these fundings, the funding for these projects would be cut if MOPAC just suddenly says, you're now part of the MPS.
Yep.
And I'm sure the Met Police haven't got, you know, a fund that they say, oh yes, you know, here's £5,000 for you and here's 10 grand for you. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. And it would be that the communities would suffer if MOPAC move their allegiance and cut their funding for SMBs.
No, it's very much the crux of the issue. I'm conscious of time, Chair. Mirren, was there anything you wish to add to anything that was said there? Because this is it's a fundamental change we're looking at.
I'm afraid we haven't been told about that. Certainly, we still receive funding from MOPAC as and when we need it. So we have it to renew the website and then also for training, and that does come from MOPAC. I think it would jeopardise our independence if it came from the MPS, though.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, what an interesting panel. Thank you so much. I'd really like to thank all of our guests for attending this morning and for their answers to our questions. Can I ask the committee to note the report and discussion? Thank you. Can we also delegate authority to the Chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme? Thank you. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 28th of January at 10 a.m. in the Chamber. I have no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting.